The day Julian left me, he laid all my fertility reports across the kitchen table like a winning hand of poker. He smiled, a cold, cruel smile I had never seen before, and said, "Chloe's pregnant. Now you finally understand. The problem was always you." 6 years. 6 years of injections, surgeries, failed IVFs, and silent humiliation. And Julian had played the loving husband through all of it, holding my hand in every clinic, wiping my tears after every negative test, whispering, "We'll get through this together." But it was all a lie. Before dawn the next morning, he drained our joint bank account, cancelled my health insurance, changed the locks on our house, and filed a false police report claiming I had abandoned the marriage voluntarily. His lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter within 24 hours. I stood on the sidewalk in my pajamas, clutching a small duffel bag, watching the house I had helped buy, the house my father had left me money for, become a stranger's fortress. That's when I noticed him. Garrison Blackwood. He lived across the street. The whole neighborhood knew him as the retired, quiet sheriff who kept to himself. He never attended block parties, never waved first, just sat on his porch every evening with a cup of black coffee, watching the sunset. But that morning he walked over. No greeting, no pity in his eyes, just a calm, steady voice. "Do you have a safe place to stay tonight?" I shook my head, tears streaming. He handed me 3 things: a spare key to his guest house, a business card of the most ruthless divorce attorney in the state, Margaret Holloway, a prepaid appointment slip with a fertility specialist in Boston, already paid in full. I stared at him, confused. Why are you doing this for me?" He looked at me with those deep, unreadable eyes and said quietly, "Because Julian lied." Then he placed another medical report in my trembling hands. It was Julian's own fertility test, dated 6 years ago, from the very first clinic we ever visited. The last line read, "Severe male factor infertility. Natural conception is virtually impossible." My legs gave way. I collapsed onto the curb. 6 years. 6 years of blaming myself. 6 years of apologizing for my broken body. And Julian knew the truth from day one. He had hidden his own report and let me believe I was the failure. How did you get this?" I whispered. Garrison didn't flinch. "Because I kept a copy. I was the sheriff who investigated a blackmail case involving that clinic years ago. I saw your names on the file. I knew Julian had requested his report be sealed. I also knew he was planning to use you as a scapegoat someday." I looked at him, this quiet, lonely old man whom everyone dismissed as irrelevant. He wasn't irrelevant. He was a ticking bomb of truth, waiting for the right moment to explode. I moved into Garrison's guest house that night. It was small but clean, with fresh sheets, a stocked fridge, and a folder on the desk titled "Evidence Against Julian Archer." Inside were bank statements showing Julian had been transferring money to a secret account for 3 years, emails between Julian and his lawyer planning the false abandonment narrative, a recorded phone call where Julian bragged to a friend, "She'll never know it was me all along. I'll make her think she's crazy." Garrison had been collecting this for years, not out of obsession but out of habit. As a former sheriff, he couldn't stand injustice, and he had watched Julian manipulate me from across the street for half a decade. I saw you cry every time you came back from the clinic. I saw him hug you outside the door, then roll his eyes the moment you turned around. I don't interfere in people's lives, but this was cruelty dressed as love. With Margaret Holloway's help, I filed for divorce, not just for separation, but for fraud, emotional abuse, and financial theft. Within 3 weeks, the court froze Julian's assets. He was ordered to vacate my house. Yes, the title was restored to my name. He screamed at me outside the courthouse. "You think you've won. You're still a barren woman. No man will ever want you." Garrison stepped forward, calm, steady, like a mountain. "She's not barren, Julian. You are, and everyone in this town will soon know that." He handed Julian's medical report to every local news outlet. Within 48 hours, Julian became a social pariah. His business partners dropped him. His mistress Chloe left him when she learned he couldn't give her children either. He had built his identity on making me feel small, and now he was the smallest man in the county. But Garrison didn't stop at revenge. He sat me down one afternoon and said, "You still want a child, don't you?" I nodded, tears in my eyes. "Then let me help you, the right way. Not through lies, not through manipulation, through science and dignity." He used his connections to get me into the Boston Reproductive Institute, one of the best in the country. He paid for the entire donor egg and surrogacy consultation out of his own pension. He said, "I have no family, no children, no one to leave my money to, but I've watched you suffer quietly for years. If I can turn your pain into joy, that's a better legacy than any bank balance." 6 months later, I was pregnant. Twins. The doctor called it a textbook success. I cried in the examination room, not from pain, but from pure, overwhelming gratitude. Garrison drove me to every appointment. He waited in the waiting room, reading old crime novels, never complaining. The nurses thought he was my father. I never corrected them. But the truth was, he had become something more, a guardian, a silent warrior, a man who had seen the worst of humanity and still chose to protect the broken. The shock came on a bright Tuesday morning. Julian, now bankrupt, living in a motel on the edge of town, received a letter from a private investigator he had hired to dig up dirt on Garrison. He stormed into the courthouse during one of our final hearings, waving the letter like a madman. "You all think this old man is a hero. He's not. He's a fraud. I have proof." The judge allowed him to speak. Julian yelled, "Garrison Blackwood isn't just a retired sheriff, he's the former director of the National Intelligence Recovery Unit. He ran covert operations across 3 continents. He has classified files on half the politicians in this state. He's not a lonely old man. He's a government weapon who chose to hide in this dump of a town." Silence. Everyone turned to Garrison. He stood up slowly, not with anger, but with quiet dignity. "That's correct. I did serve in that capacity, and I retired here to escape the noise. But none of that changes what Julian did to this woman. None of that changes the truth." He looked directly at Julian. "You thought I was just a helpless old neighbor. You thought you could destroy her and walk away.
but I've spent 30 years catching people like you, men who hide their crimes behind charm and privilege. You never stood a chance, not because I'm powerful, but because you're guilty." The courtroom erupted. Julian's face turned white. His lawyer immediately withdrew from the case. The judge ruled in my favor: full custody of my house, full restitution of stolen funds, and a permanent restraining order. Today I'm 8 months pregnant. The twins are healthy, a boy and a girl. I live in my father's house again, but now it's filled with soft music, baby clothes, and the smell of homemade soup that Garrison brings over every evening. He doesn't live across the street anymore. He moved into my guest house last month, not as a tenant, but as family. We sit on the porch together every night, watching the stars. He tells me